Riël Malan, you are our first studio guest. How cool is that?
It's a cool studio.
Yeah.
Great to be here in the middle of Hermanus.
In the middle of Hermanus. And I tell you, it is a long journey because it's 4 years ago that we closed up our studio in Bryanston.
Okay.
So it just shows how remote the world has been. But we're here to find out about you. Your surname is Malan with 2 L's.
No, that's a long story. It's 1 L, but that's
Is it 1 L?
It's 1 L.
Sometimes
it used to. Malan was spelled with 2 L's at some point. So it's somewhere, probably an illiterate Malan lost the 1 L somewhere. So it was, yeah.
But it's very much a French Huguenot kind of story, and I was trying to get to the bottom of this in conversation with Jeanette, who you met, my wife, and we were talking about the French Huguenots and how they were quite incredible people, leaving, unlike, well, they had an option, didn't they? The Catholics either killed them or they converted to Catholicism back then.
Exactly.
And these were the guys who said, no, we're not going to convert, we're going to leave. And a whole bunch of them came to South Africa. And that's where your roots are.
So my roots are, Malan's originally actually from Italy. I just recently did the trip and the visit to the Angronia Valley, which is very similar from the Malan surname pitched or surfaced in about the 12th century, and then same story, Catholics chased them over the mountains to France, and about 100 years later they joined the Huguenots that then, yes, in hot pursuit of, the Catholics being in hot pursuit of them, ended up coming down here as farmers and a knowledgeable workforce that the old VOC, the Verenigde Oost-Indische Compagnie, the Dutch East Indian Company brought them down here to come and grow wine and fruit and produce to replenish the vessels, which were docking and standing over in Cape Town. So
is there much of that in the way you grew up? And I really love finding out history because it does give you an understanding of the present and the future. That kind of heartfulness, we won't be converted approach of the Huguenots. Is there any of that in your family still?
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, I'm probably the most moderate, which some people would frown when I say that. But I mean, I think Afrikaners or Huguenots, Afrikaners from French Huguenot descent, have that. They left Europe and a few other places as well. But let's talk about the Huguenots. Europe to come to a very uncertain future here. So not willing to stand under whatever ideology was being forced down on them, and if you look at that, I mean, somewhere when I get to a point where I have more time on my hands, I'm going to write the seven or nine cataclysms of the Afrikaner man, because I mean, between how they left Europe, and then if you just take at the recent history, look at the First Boer War, Second Boer War, look at the First World War, you look at the Great Depression that wiped them almost completely out, and then you had 48, you had apartheid, you had the fall of apartheid, and all those transitions that needed to be made to the point where I think you still see a lot of that resilience now, and you see how Afrikaner business is rising again in many ways, and at least it's always, I think, been very active and very, very resilient, but stepping forward and saying, this is what we have to offer. We are pragmatic and we are problem solvers, and use us more in this new environment that we're finding ourselves in South Africa. I mean, and I look at Europe and I look at the problems they're having, and I look at the US, and I think we've dealt with so many issues in the last 30 years in South Africa. I don't think we give ourselves enough credit for that, really.
Yeah. I'm reminded of, for me, the quote of the BizNews conference that we just finished earlier this month came from Bernard Mostert. They have just signed up Rassie as to have a new line of clothes for their Pringle. There we go, Pringle brand. And he said at the end, he said to Rassie, okay, I'm going to ask you some quick questions and quick answers. South Africans are fucking tough. I thought that resilience. Tough. Yeah. It is a trait that we are. Well, Donald Trump seems to like it very much.
It seems so, yes. Yeah.
But back to you, and you've had a fascinating business career.
Yeah. Tumultuous.
Well, what I couldn't understand was you started off doing something different to everyone else. So I've had 2 startups in my life, BizNews being the second one. The first one, I didn't leave happily. I left because I needed to. And this time around, I'm really not going to be leaving this happily because I haven't got a third startup in my life. And yet, your business was all about creating startups.
I think initially, yes. I mean, it's now gotten to the point where I'm consolidating old businesses, brands.
There are two paths for Riël Malan, and I want to start with the first one. Your first business, Unlimited
Group, yeah.
That was part that really fascinated me. Why did you decide to do that?
Look, necessity is the mother of invention, I think, at the end of the day. I joined the family farming operation. And it was just sort of it was just before I finished my studies at Stellenbosch in 94, exactly the same time, when all of the changes in South Africa happened. And my family took an interesting path in terms of agriculture. So I'm the first one to have broken that tradition of not farming, of not making my living from the land. And my my grandfather and my father took a view on it. It was largely created by the Nat government and the environment for farming, where you were looking at an inflation rate of 15-16%, and you had a subsidized interest rate from a land bank of 7-8%, and there was a very nice differential. So you just had to sort of break even on your operations, and then there was a nice sort of upside that you could create from that. So debt actually made us money. And in 94, between 94 and 97, all of this changed. We had the run on the rand. We had inflation dropping to 5, 6, 7%, and then interest rates going to 25%. And all of a sudden, I mean, we were hugely underwater. And that was the time when I joined the business.
And remembering, your farming was in the Cape. That's where you start, because there's a big difference between farming north of the country and as I'm realizing now, living in the Cape.
Yeah, and my father was a table grape farmer at that stage, and I remember we were packing fruit under the Swaziland name, and it was all sanction busting. It was all very much along those lines. But when I joined the business at that stage, it was very, very clear very quickly that we are in deep trouble and that I needed to look at something else. And that's, I think, where I've always been entrepreneurial throughout my school career as well, but that was sort of...
So?
I had all kinds of ventures. I had shops on the farm. I had a cosmetics startup in my university career. I didn't have student debt, so I took a student loan and I started this cosmetics business. So I've always dabbled in.
When did you start? What age?
I would say, well, probably from 10 onwards, 7, 8, 9, 10 onwards. That was a small shop I had on the farm, and we were quite far out of the town at that stage, and that sort of, I think that gene just sort of continued to be nurtured.
A 10-year-old. Now, Warren Buffett had similar starting, where he had his newspaper round, but not like my newspaper round where I delivered the newspapers. He had other kids working for him as a 10-year-old. So clearly, there's something in this entrepreneurial gene.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Alon Ray's, I had a sabbatical at one stage about 6-7 years ago, and I had an interview during a podcast series that I did, and he said, if he judges entrepreneurs, he says, if you have father issues, come to the front of the queue, because there's something that you want to prove. If you have
father issues.
Well, let's see if you have daddy issues. If you have,
but what's daddy? Girls have daddy issues.
We'll get to that now. If you have a doting mother and daddy issues, you can come right to the front of the queue. So, I mean, my father and I had a complicated relationship. It was a great taskmaster in many ways, and I had a doting mother. So, I think those two things. She believes in what you can do and what you should. And if you come with an idea, it was never shot down. And my father was this very hard sort of things, there was a right and a wrong way to do things. So between those two, I think the gene was just nurtured from a very early age, and the environment, of course. I mean, and when I joined the business or the family business, seeing that it had significant trouble, and my father at that stage was quite ill, so it fell on me to then find solutions, and that's when the first major startup came from, where where we, at that stage, had deregulation by Dirk Hanekom, deregulated the fruit industry. And before that, we had the egg board and the maize board and the deciduous fruit board. So we had to sell through the government-appointed agents. And then that stopped. And all of a sudden, not that all of a sudden, I was one of the first guys to get a permit with a friend. We were 3 or 4 permits that were issued the year before full deregulation happened. And that enabled me to, to start looking at international markets. So I got on a plane, never been overseas.
It was post 94, of course.
Post 94, this was around 96, 97. Deregulation happened in 97. So this was around 97, 98. Got on a plane, never been overseas before, flew to the UK, flew to France, flew to Holland, and found a couple of customers through, I can't even remember how, probably my fax machine. We still had faxes in those days. And that then led to the startup of Fruits Unlimited, which was a startup between my family and 2 or 3 other families, which I then ended up heading up. I sort of saw the writing on the wall on the family farming operation, started shifting my time to Fruits Unlimited, ended up selling the farms in 2004. And then this grew to the first significant business, which was the Unlimited Group over time. We merged with 1 or 2 other businesses over time. And I headed that up for the better part of 19, almost close to 20 years.
The part that came out to me was you had many startups in the Unlimited Group.
Many.
And the success rate was not that high.
Well, I mean, if you look at startup success rate in general, it's very low. But I think we ended up having 7 or 8 businesses of the 36 I counted when I exited, just sort of did a bit of a reflection on it.
You started 36 businesses.
We started 36 businesses.
And 7 or 8?
Seven, I think, ended up sticking, and some of them we merged in, and some of them we just closed. And, some of them just had a spike, and they had a reason for existence.
36 startups.
Yes.
2 is too much for me. So where does the energy come from to do 36?
I think when you have sort of, and I think even in the current scenario where I'm finding myself now with Nurture Brands and Exeo Capital, if there's a basic infrastructure, you have your you have a strong CFO, you've got a strong logistics department, supply chain. I've always tended to go to sort of, if you have a nucleus of a strong business, then it's easy to look at finding opportunities out there and then incubating them in-house. So it's a little bit different to where you do a startup, it's either works or it doesn't, or you sell it, you draw a line through it, and you move on to the next one, and you have to replicate the infrastructure all over again. So I've always taken the view around sort of making sure that you sort of look at adjacent business. And it's always a core philosophy as well. Don't move too far away. Buffett always talks about your circle of competency. If you move too far away from your circle of competency, it's a whole new learning curve. And I have found myself over the years in sort of food and food-related businesses largely now. And later we're starting to expand a little bit in terms of pharmaceuticals and nutraceuticals, which is also still food. It's just very specialized food. But I always try to stay sort of as close to my core competency and understanding the economics and the dynamics of a sector. So having a strong core infrastructure where you can you can bank on the information you're getting, you can bank on the people that's supporting you, and then finding adjacent sort of startup areas and doing that often in partnerships. Often what we provide is, we would say, let's do a joint venture. At the moment, we're busy with 3 new supplement brands with well-known influencers, or I would say influencers, just people that's known to the public in specific areas of health and wellness, where we say, you come into Nurture Brands in a joint venture with 50-50 partners. We'll provide the manufacturing, we'll provide the formulations, we provide the marketing, and you're the face, and you bring it's often the intellectual capital around the formulations to the table, and we then execute on that. You do what you do best, and we do what we do, and that's a partnership where then we create a lot of value. So having that core, I think, is for me, that's probably why we've been able to do so many over the years.
And I have no doubt that you also learned a heck of a lot through there.
Yes.
Was there any one failure or one closing down the business that sticks with you?
I mean, there's every one that doesn't work, you learn a lesson. And I think the biggest mistake you can make is to sort of say, I'm never going there again. I'm never touching that sector again. It's just been such a bad experience, where you should take that and you should go do it again. So I had to...
Back on the bicycle, back on the horse.
Yes. So but also just assimilating the learnings from it. So there were two. I mean, we were in a logistics business where the team in the business decided to walk out and start their own business. And it was a great business. It went very well, and I had restraints of trade, and then took them to court, won those court cases, lost the clients in any case, won the battle but lost the war. So that was an interesting example.
What would you have done if you could get into a time machine and go back to the beginning there?
Probably given the team equity earlier, given them a reason to stay. So to this day, I think I see everyone that I work with as partners, and we try to incorporate as many of our senior staff members as partners. We was at the moment in a deal where we're trying to do that again.
Partners in an equity sense.
Yes.
Own part of the business.
It's interesting coming back to our Huguenot and our Dutch and our heritage. We left. Even if you look at the British settlers, we left because we couldn't own land. It wasn't, it was this new world. We could own something and we can create something from what we own. And I think it's quite I find that the sense or the need to own a stake in what you do provides just so much more meaning to myself and to people in general. You do get people who sort of says, I want to arrive and I want to have a fulfilling job, and off we go. But I find that a large percentage of driven, talented people wants to have a stake and want to say, this is something that I'm building together with X or Y. And I as you get older, I think you're also starting to understand what drives people and what drives behavior that will give you an edge in a very competitive market. I mean, there's very little, it's not in oversupply at the moment.
Before we go into the second part, path 2, you took a sabbatical after 18 years, a 4-month sabbatical. And then a couple of years later, you were gone with that business and started the new one.
Yeah.
What did you do in that sabbatical? I refer you to Koos Becker, who's, I think, taken 2 sabbaticals of 1 year and has come back re-energized, and certainly during that time helped the company that that he was running. In your case, where did you go? Who did you talk to? What did you learn?
It was a wonderful experience, and I would credit that experience to a large degree sort of for my real 2.0 sort of life that I'm having at the moment. So after 18 odd years running and being involved in this export marketing, distribution, import, export, farming, we sold the family farms, and then this organization, we started farming corporately. So we had farms in Mpumalanga, Limpopo, Free State. So ended up being a high energy consuming business, and
1,000+ employees, billion rand turnover. That's a proper business
for agriculture, and from where we were then, from where we came from. It was a fantastic growth, and we had we had ups and downs, and stared down the abyss a couple of times, and so if we fall down here, we're never coming back. So a very typical agricultural primary business, lots of ups and downs, but tremendous learnings from that, but huge energy. And especially on the farming side of things, primary agriculture, I don't think people realize what a tough business that is, and it has become. I mean, this whole land issue we're having, discussions we're having, is do we realize how tough it is to make a life from the land at the moment? But anyway, so that took its toll, and then I think it was 2018, I said, look, I am just completely burned out. It was like walking through thick mud in Wellington boots, so you just one step after the other. And then arranged I was looking for looking to do a 9-month sabbatical. Made it happen with my partners, and to their credit, they allowed me to do it. And I said, look, I'll come in once a week. I wanted to do this and just get a bit of perspective. And then had a couple of discussions with people who had sabbaticals before, and said there's a number of things that you need to do have a good sabbatical, you need to remove yourself from your day-to-day, which wasn't completely possible for me, so I had to go back once a week. But remove yourself from that environment. So I was living in Paarl, and our head office was in Paarl at that stage. So I ended up renting a house here in Onrus, close, just around the corner from where we're sitting now, and ended up buying a house later there as a result of that. And so remove yourself from that. I even removed myself from sort of the day-to-day of my family. So if they lived in Paarl, they joined me over weekends. But so I then had time on my own to sort of really reflect. That was how it was designed. Secondly, a friend of mine said, look, try and find something purposeful to do and not just sit there and stare at because before you know it, this is, the 9 months is over. So, I set out a couple of priorities. I said I wanted to do something purposeful, and I felt the podcast trend was sort of really getting going at that stage, and I felt there wasn't a depository of just conversations with leaders, much like we're doing now. At that stage, there were very little of that happening. So I, through my YPO membership, had access to a lot of very interesting people. So I started with that.
YPO?
Young Presidents Organization. It's a sort of a fraternity of CEOs that you have to run it's an American organization, but a very strong South African chapter. So you network with fellow CEOs.
Of a certain size.
Above $15 million. So it's significant businesses in South African context. And there's, I think it's about 800 members in South Africa. So that's a big part of my education. And we can talk about that, of my sort of formal business education. So I did that. Wanted to travel a bit. So I wanted to go to the Amazon. I wanted to go to a Zen retreat in Japan. I sort of had that set out. And then a very specific sort of process that I, at that stage, I can't even remember who gave it to me, how you unpack sort of your life from a journaling perspective. Just, if you can't write it down, it doesn't really happen. I think that's sort of what I've realized. And if you can't write it down and explain it properly to yourself, you don't really fully internalize and spend the time to think it through. So significant journaling. And
did you only start journaling then?
No, I've been journaling for a long time, but this was specifically around sort of lessons learned. If I now have to design my second part of my life, what would this look like? And a lot of it came through where I said, look, I don't want to be in a business again where I don't have a brand. I mean, agriculture doesn't matter what you produce. Very, very few agricultural companies have brands. They go into maize meal, or you go into
avos.
Into avos. It's an avo is an avo. There are definitely, if you're in the trade, there's different types of avos and varieties, but by and large, brands are not really driving that business. So I didn't want to go into that. I wanted to be sure that this typical rat race must sort of be a little bit different in terms of the ethos of a company. So all those things I sort of wrote down, never thinking that, how the power of that. And the power of that really is that as you internalize these things and as you unpack them for yourself, you do start weaving it into your own sort of priority set, and you start manifesting that going forward. And so that was sort of a process of 2-3 months. But what was interesting to me, so I started this process.
How old were you at this stage?
So this was in 2018. So I was 45.
Is that
46?
Typical kind of, I'm not going to say a midlife crisis, but
isn't
that when the guys get Harleys? And
I like to call it midlife awakening. It's not a crisis. Depends on what you do, I suppose. Yeah, I think it's, and for me, I should have done it earlier. If in retrospect, I had that feeling of it starting to becoming very hard work, probably from 44, 45 onwards. So I think probably early 40s, early to late 40s is, I don't think there's a specific, it's all your personal circumstances. We all have responsibilities and things you have to take into consideration. But
so you wanted a brand.
Yeah.
You journaled a lot about it, so you understood and you internalized a lot of it.
Yeah, so designing the future.
Food.
Yes.
What about, because you're not just food, you're wellness. There's a lot of gunky food in the market nowadays.
Yeah, and I think it's also about, a big part for me was what is the difference you're going to be making? I mean, just to make money, what did Henry Ford say? A business that just makes money is a poor business. And And so many of the businesses we pursue are poor.
Yeah.
I mean, and the business models are poor. And then we ask ourselves, why are they not doing well? Why are we not doing well? Why are we having heart attacks by 55, 60, or the cancer pandemics? I think it's just, and the world can't just be run by people doing what they love. I mean, I think that's also, it's a bit of there's always something in your life that you don't like. But if you, by and large, get to your sweet spot, what is the unique value proposition that you bring to the world? That was a much more difficult, it's one of the things I had to answer to myself then. It's a much harder question to answer, really, than just you think, I do this and I do that. But at the core, what is it? And for me, it was finding out that creating value by connecting these dots and then making people that are part of these dots valuable to the business and to themselves was a big part of the realization of what my sweet spot was. I wasn't great at the detail and the accounting but I was good at seeing the trends, and I was good at seeing opportunities, and I needed to find a space where I can bring all these things together.
And Nurture Brands, was it?
Well, then after the sabbatical with all these ideas, went back, still sitting in this business, which was taking a lot of energy. We were 3 partners. One partner wanted to retire. I wanted to leave, so we decided wanted to stay, which was good for continuity. So we embarked on a process of selling, and that was really for the first time that I really aggressively went out to sell something. I mean, I've sold a little bit, a division here and there, but not a business. So, and realized we were not ready for to sell. So that took another year or 2. We had to gear up and get our documentation and our management account and our structures right. Had one failed attempt to sell, and then finally ended up selling to an industry sort of colleague or a competitor, and did that deal towards the end of 2021, and I think wrote it out to about 2022. My partner of that, in that venture, started a private equity firm, Exero Capital, which I'm still with at the moment, as a shareholder, and they were a private equity food and agri and related supply chains private equity fund, one of the first ones in South Africa.
Again, focused.
Very focused in that sort of sector, sub-Saharan, which was interesting. So it wasn't only South Africa. The investments in Kenya, and we also have one of our partners, Paul Naguru, is in Kenya, based in Kenya. So I joined them and I joined them on the basis of, they said, look, private equity has its constraints. We are looking to establish a longer-term permanent capital vehicle, which we don't have these. Private equity tends to have 5 to 7 year horizons. It's not changing. What? Meaning that a fund manager gets money. They invest in a business who usually wants to do some sort of a project or has opportunities they want to do, whether acquisition or otherwise. That is then realized, that value, and they would exit within 5 to 7 years.
Selling to somebody,
selling
maybe.
to an industry
listing on the stock market,
or another private equity firm, obviously. And that in Africa, I mean, my mind has, and we can see it has constraints. Africa, things move slower. There's more to do. We don't necessarily have the balance sheet engineering to our disposal that the Americans have. We don't have the depth of private equity markets. I mean, you would see there, which is probably a podcast in itself, where one private equity firm buys from the other private equity firm buys from another one. It's sort of almost a dog chasing itself. And at some stage, if that cycle breaks, who's going to buy it? And you are finding, to a degree, private equity at the moment has an issue in African around disposals, around like getting out in 5 to 7 years. Many funds are now extending their lifespan
because they have to. Whereas in your case, you wanted to have an extended lifespan.
I wanted to start off with, even with Nurture Brands. So Nurture Brands does not have a fixed term. So I joined them, and the brief was amazing. Sort of then fed into my sabbatical, where go and find for us a model around in the food and related sectors that will generate outsized returns in relative terms, and that has a reasonable moat around it, where this is something that that is protected from all the ups and downs of food, because food is very cyclical.
You mentioned moat, and it's something you and I both know about because we follow Warren Buffett. But for those who've never heard this term before,
it's really about making sure that your business is isolated from the market forces to a degree. No business is completely isolated, but you want to be a little bit different. You want, and let's call it. Let's use an example. A brand is protected to the degree that, if there's a generic product coming by and the consumer has to make a choice between a generic product and a brand, they usually go for the brand. So it's just things that sort of protects you a little bit, whether it's maybe scale, it's a brand, it's technology sometimes in technology business. It's just making, it's something that
gives you an edge.
The old castles where they had the moat around it, sort of, you just can't get the riff-raff to come and attack you and before they haven't swum the moat.
What was your first deal in Nurture Brands?
So Nurture Brands was then established, and the first deal that we did was actually we bought a stake in Fairview Cheese, which was an old brand. The family started restructuring a little bit, and that was an opportunity that came by, and we made our first investment there.
A cheese maker.
A cheese maker.
Strange decision, but I guess from your background, you understood agriculture.
Yes, and also a very high level of intellectual capital. So you're looking at, cheese in South Africa is not nearly as consumed as much as it is in Europe. So fewer players that need to do far more different variants of cheese. We specifically went for soft cheese. For all a host of different reasons, it's a fairly quick turnaround business versus longer life cheese that you compete with imported products. So there's a bit of a moat around your locally produced soft cheese. And just a very strong brand, wonderful brand. Fairview also has a wine brand. We did not invest in the wine brand. We carved out the cheese brand, and we co-invested invested in the business with the founder. So big part of what the philosophy that we're running at Nurture Brands is that we don't want the founder to leave. We would like him to stay as long as possible, preferably making him a partner for a medium to long term, and make sure that, because I think that's the other part of private equity. Why would the business do better if we now bring our capital there? All of a sudden, there's an arrogance to that which I couldn't always understand. But if you say, if I bring my capital with you, we keep your intellectual capital, and now we go look for opportunities, outside. Then it's 1 + 1 = 4 rather than 1 + 1.
And what opportunities were there for a cheesemaker?
So Fairview's invested quite a bit in technology. So very interesting how they've been keeping up with international trends. We then it was predominantly a Western Cape. It's a national brand, but very Western Cape focused. So then we acquired a very similar business, Meze Foods, in Gauteng. So now we had a north-south leg to it. Meze has a wonderful condiments and specialized bakery side of it. So all of a sudden, the product range in the specialized food side became much bigger. Meze owned Last Mile, which we in the Fairview's mainly made use of distributors before. So Meze was then acquired by Fairview, and all of a sudden this became a national footprint business and a much broader business in the South African
and using
sense.
your capital to take 1 + 1 = 3. I kind of get that.
Yeah.
And Vital Brands, that's the one that when you look at your portfolio, most people will resonate with. It's been around a long time. It's
having our
also
80th birthday next year.
80th birthday. Yes. Sure. Did you have to change the culture there, or was it the culture that attracted you?
It was interesting that when Vital is this wonderful brand, as you know, it was established in 1947 by a husband and wife team, the Grieve family, and went, grew and when they were selling supplements at a time where internationally there wasn't a supplement sector really. So they in global terms were pioneers.
Why did they do that?
It's interesting. We're launching a brand in the next couple of months called Julia Sands. Now, Julia Sands was the grandmother who started she was a trailblazer. She was alternative. She was actually, I think she was the first female mayor of Durbanville. and her husband was a pharmacist. And between the two of them, they were just alternative, health-orientated people at a time when most people smoked and ate meat 3 times a day.
Because it was good for you.
It was good for you. Yes, you actually had a smoking. Look at the ads for smoking these days. You can't believe what they got away with. But so they established this brand, and it was hugely successful as a family. And went to a second generation. It was small and then grew, and the third generation had some issues with each other. Typical 3-generation cycle. Private equity got involved. Private equity restructured a lot of it. Over the course of 2, 3, 4 CEOs, many of the formulations and points of difference just sort of fell by the wayside. And we bought it just after COVID, which was great for the guys who sold it, because we had this massive spike where they were selling vitamin C and zinc and selenium by the truckload. So we bought at that stage, again, timed it wrong. We recognized that there was a long tail after COVID, and modeled for it, but we didn't model how deep that would go. But it was a great brand. It had manufacturing capabilities, GMP pharma manufacturing capabilities, a great world-class factory, and so much residual brand equity there, and some food as well in there, so functional food. So did the work, saw that it was, if you ask anybody in the street about list top 3 supplement brands, Vital would always be there. So on the back of that, we invested in it, and then we did a significant restructure. At that stage, I was very much still involved with XO Capital. I got fully involved in Nurture Brands, so that was now then I think it was in 2025, I joined Nurture Brands full-time as the CEO. And we went through this incredible journey where we were really sweating blood at one stage, because this cycle just went down, down, down. And we ended up turning the corner about 24 months ago, probably going on 36 months ago. But yes, significant cultural changes. Because the business was struggling, trust wasn't great, because we had CEO after CEO after CEO, typical corporate story. And then all of a sudden, all these things that the design of what I thought a business should be that brings value to not only the stakeholders but also to the employees and to society at large started to come together in this ethos around, how do we look at which brands? And we added a couple of other brands over the course of the last 2 years. And we came to the conclusion that it needs to be, we're passionate about well-being, and whether you enjoying a Mediterranean meal with your family, or with the Meso products, and you go to the Blue Zones methodology. I don't know how much you know about the Blue Zone methodology, is where they mapped where in the world where the most centenarians come.
Of course, yeah.
And those blue zones, they said, what makes those? And it's family, it's olive oil, often seafood diets, it's sense of community. So all those elements we started weaving into this ethos that we started bringing into Nurture Brands. So Nurture Brands has now become this, and it's a team effort with my team, and we lost almost none of the old core team that had all these challenges when I joined them, but we all came together. You and I have spoken a bit about. We brought a wonderful coach into the mix that dealt with all the ego issues, with all the trust issues, and for the last 2-3 years we've been digging very deep in terms of team issues, to the point where the team is now, in my mind, spending so little time on political or interpersonal issues, and spending much more time on how the business goes forward. And that's an interest. So
the coaches are we have one. Ferdy's our coach here at BizNews, and the value that is brought by an external coach who actually knows their stuff is hard to overemphasize, isn't it?
I started working with John T. Meyer as the coach that we use. I started working with John T. Probably a year before I somebody said, look, just see him. And I was very skeptical. What, after all of the internal work that I did and the sabbatical, I mean, what is he going to teach me? And his pitch was very simple. As if you look at an athlete, he's got a fitness coach, a strength coach, he's got a dietitian, all these different coaches to perform optimally, but you business people think you can just do it yourself. And that was a penny drop for me, and I worked with him a bit, realized, because I also started trusting him first, because I think that's the one question mark that I always have is you allow somebody into the heart of your organization. So from an ethos and from an ethics perspective and from a philosophical perspective, you need to have a high degree of alignment if you allow that in, because this person is going to work with your team's soul at the end of the day. And he did a wonderful job, and we've now, John T. and other coaches have now been deployed in other parts of the business, and all the senior teams in the various underlying businesses. There's a number of them now. There's I think we are now looking at 9 operating businesses under the Nurture Brands umbrella. It's
been a fascinating conversation, and I'm not going to let you go though until we can just look back and look forward.
Yes.
Let's look back first. If you could go back to your 25-year-old self, if you could go back to the guy who was starting all these startups, what would you be telling? What advice could you pass on today?
I would tell him to potentially not take it as personally as I did at that stage, that it is part of a learning experience. You learn a skill and a craft as a entrepreneur. It is a tough craft to master, in the sense that you have to realize that you're setting yourself up for failure. If I look at the number of various businesses that failed versus the ones that succeeded, there's far more that fail. And initially, I took it very personally. So a youngster, and I do mentor a couple of entrepreneurs, sort of saying is that get out there and just do something. You're never going to have the perfect environment, and be comfortable with failure, and don't take it personally.
I like that. I remember I went to Monaco in 2006 because I remember it. I've got a little plucky there on the wall. When Bill Lynch, who started Imperial, was the World Entrepreneur of the Year.
I remember,
EY they were our sponsor, and they sent me off there. It was great fun. And I asked him afterwards, Bill, what's the secret? Because and there were some hotshot entrepreneurs there. In fact, he beat that year the guy from Whole Foods.
Oh, wow, yeah.
The
some conscious capitalism guy.
Good guys. And the
guy.
Google guys had won the award and so on. And he said, just do it.
I mean, I'm looking at it in your office through the window there, the Teddy Roosevelt quote about the man in the arena. Sort of, if you have blood on your face and you lose a few limbs, but at least you tried. And I think that would be my advice to young entrepreneurs, especially now. I mean, there's so many negative influences that sort of saying, don't even try. You're never going to succeed. Specifically, if you look at social media, how on the one hand, I think there's great exposure to entrepreneurs. On the other hand, there's this standard that's being set that by 25 or 27, you should be a billionaire. Otherwise, you didn't make it. And there's so few of those guys that keep it, because I think if you have too much success when you're young, I look at myself. I did that. If I was successful at the age of 28 or 30 or 32, it wouldn't have nearly propelled me to the point where I'm now. And so failure is the best possible MBA that you can ask for.
And then on the other hand, let's look ahead.
Yeah.
Nurture Brands in let's make it 10 years.
Yes.
How are you seeing it then?
We've got great ambitions for Nurture Brands. We as a team, we want to make it a 10 billion group by 2032.
And where are you now?
We're sitting at about 3 billion at the moment, between 2.5 and 3 billion. We'll see how the year goes out. It's a tough year that we're in at the moment. And that won't just be organic growth. I mean, I have a philosophy that I don't think organic growth is unless you have some sort of a technology working for you. I think growth in businesses and value creation are going to come from consolidation. pretty much what we're doing at the moment, because medium-sized businesses are struggling more and more. So you need marketing, you need back office, you need world-class services, but you can't always afford it. So we think consolidation is the way to go. So that 10 billion would be a combination of organic growth. We are growing well at the moment. Came out of a slump in most of the businesses.
From 7, or how many
We now
units?
nine
units.
businesses.
How many would you imagine having by 2032?
It's very opportunistic. So for me, what I have done, which in the past I would have run. I was like a dog chasing opportunities. Now I'm much more discerning. I would rather go much deeper in a subsector. So we are in specialized foods, we're in nutraceuticals, we are in pet health to a small degree with one of the businesses, and we're now going much deeper in
So bolt-on
nutraceuticals.
acquisition.
Bolt-on acquisitions, again, in your sphere of influence, but also to be able to utilize economies of scale within this consolidation.
And a listing?
It's interesting. You're not the first one this week to ask me this, and if you look at the trend of delistings, it's there's a reason for that. I think the flexibility that we have with private capital is worth a lot. If you are aligned with your shareholders, they let you get on with it, and you spend, again, coming back to the point around, if you spend too much time on internal politics, you don't spend time on the business. If you spend too much time on managing stakeholders, you don't spend time on the business. And I just look at some of my friends that are involved in listed companies. It's cumbersome. So I'm not I'm not saying it's not possible, but the trend is against that. And at the moment, I'm enjoying private capital.
What percentage of time do you think listed CEOs spend on investor relations?
It's difficult for me to say. I've never been in a listed environment, but my perception, if I look at them and speak to them, it's a fairly large percentage.
I read once, it was from a investor relations firm, but they said 70%.
I wouldn't be surprised. I've been in private businesses where the relationships breaks down, among shareholders, and before there was that book. I think it was Covey's son who wrote The Speed of Trust. Everything stops, and it's almost as if the listed environment, you're assuming always the worst. So all of the listing requirements and the reporting requirements seem to just be very cumbersome. Not that we now they're not. We still do quarterly reporting, and we still do significant governance and reporting to our stakeholders in the fund. But private capital just has more. It just has more freedom, from my perspective.
You mentioned a book. Give us some to take home with.
Sure. It was interesting. The one book that really changed my life is a book called Strategic Intuition. I got to my late 30s, early 40s when this whole effort was becoming too much for me, and I said, why? I did so much. Why is it not clicking? Why is it not? I'm not getting where I want to get to. And this book was wonderful. It was about just how your life is about data points, and you're collecting data points from it. And that's also why I say to youngsters in business, you are just collecting data points. And over time, if you have enough data points and you get to a new lay of the land, you see trends and you can connect those data points into a new reality. So this guy, Bill Duggan, studied Napoleon. Why was Napoleon so successful? And it was because Napoleon studied military history from a very young age. He had millions of data points, which we can then crystallize in a new battle, and that's why it was so successful. So that was a great book.
Have you read Zach Cass? It's called The New Renaissance.
No, I haven't.
AI Science.
No, I haven't.
Very good.
Okay,
I'm busy with that at the moment.
Again, in this environment, same application. I'll have a look at that. Mastery for youngsters. I think that Robert Greene wrote. Robert Greene is from a intellectual stimulation perspective. The laws of human nature. My friends say it's an evil book, but the laws of power.
Uh-huh.
These are highly thought-provoking books, and some of them I've read more than once.
That's what Nassim Taleb says is the real judge of a book. Has it been read more than once?
Yes,
So
100%.
It kind of puts it in perspective. Well, Riël, it's been real. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Riël Malan, I think you've got the whole story from him there. It's a pleasure to have him making the debut of the BizNews in-person studio here in Hermanus. I'm Alec Hogg from BizNews.com.